Welcome to the Creative Cast. I'm your host, Tammy Munson, podcast producer, coach, and CEO of Wildfire Creative. Are you struggling to grow and monetize your podcast? Want to learn more about starting your own podcast? Are you looking for the secrets behind the business side of podcasting? Well, friends, you are in the right place. Here on the Creative Cast, I'm going to be sharing all the tips and tricks on all things podcasting for the faith-based podcaster. Each episode is going to contain powerful information to help you get started with your own podcast, learn the secrets of building a business, and of course, growing and monetizing your podcast. All right, y'all, without further ado, let's get started. Hey, y'all, and welcome to the Creative Cast. I, of course, am your host, Tammy Munson, and I am so glad that you are here with me this week. Now, I am still recovering from my hip surgery that I had on Wednesday. Everything went well, just taking more time to rest and recover. So this week, I am re-airing one of my favorite episodes from this year called It's Time to Stir Up the Water. Now, this episode was one of those moments where I had something else planned, an entirely different episode planned, but God put something on my heart and I knew that I had to share it. And so we're going to talk about one of my favorite episodes of The Chosen because y'all know how much I love that show. So without further ado, let's dive in. So y'all know that I am a big proponent of storytelling. It's what drew me to podcasting and what I believe that what podcasting is all about. And podcasters are storytellers. It's what we do. So my husband and I have very different tastes when it comes to TV shows, movies, but we can usually agree on a certain criteria if we're going to watch something together. Good direction, great character development, and of course, storytelling. One of my favorite shows that we watch together right now is The Chosen. Well, we're waiting for new episodes to come out patiently, another month. Now, I do have another TV show that we both like, which is Yellowstone, but that's a whole different topic for a whole different day. Now, okay, back to The Chosen. If you haven't seen it, you need to make a plan to start watching it because it is excellent and it will change your life. I mean, even our 24-year-old daughter is watching it with us. Now, I know that Christian media is not known for having great production value, great acting, direction, cinematography, all those kinds of things. And I'm sure you're going, what does this have to do with podcasting? And I'm going to get there. Just bear with me. The thing I love the most about The Chosen is it's the realness of it and how it brings these quote unquote characters to life. Obviously, they were real people, but they really come alive on the screen. So recently was rewatching an episode of The Chosen, season 2, episode 4. And in this episode is basically the story of where Jesus heals the paralytic, which can be found in Mark chapter 2. Verse 1 through 12 of the NIV. Now, in this episode, at the end of the episode, Jesus has healed Jesse, the paralytic, and Matthew asks him, why did he do that then? Why didn't he wait until after Shabbat? And Jesus turns to Matthew and says, sometimes you got to stir up the water, and walks off like a boss, and I absolutely loved it. And I've been thinking about this ever since I saw this episode, especially when it comes to podcasting. Now, one of the things that initially got me interested in podcasting way back in 2005 was really the ability for anyone to have a voice. Anyone could have a podcast. They could tell their story. I admit the Wild Wild West way of doing things was very attractive to me. And as a Enneagram 8, with a 7 wing, I can sometimes be a bit of a maverick when it comes to rules. Now, that really shouldn't surprise y'all at all. Because yes, there are a few things you should follow, but no one from the podcast police are going to come and find you if you don't. Anyway, I've been doing a lot of research into analytics lately for the Quick Launch project that we have been working on. And if you've seen one of my recent Instagram videos, you'll know that podcasts are very, very popular right now. As of this summer, there are over 2.4 million podcasts. Now, that's a lot. So what does this have to do with The Chosen? Well, y'all, it's time to stir up the water. One thing that I noticed when I was taking this deep dive into analytics and different podcasts was that so many of the podcasts that I was looking at were very formula driven. So you know what I'm talking about. Your music intro, maybe an ad, you got the main content, the interview, some transitional music, the outro with a call to action, and then outgoing music. Even the show notes were very formula driven. After a while, I had to make sure that I was looking at a different podcast and not the same one. Now, the thing is you don't have to have your show look and sound like everybody else's. Yes, you're going to look at other podcasts to see what you like and what you don't like. You need it to be unique. You need it to be different. Because with over 2 million podcasts and growing, you have to. It's a must to set yourself apart from the pack. Because why would you want your podcast be like all the others? So let's stir up the water, y'all. So for example, many podcasts place an ad right after their intro. So if this is what you're doing, don't panic. It's all okay. But try putting it maybe in the middle of your interview where you have a natural break in that conversation. Again, a little different, but it's okay. And so talking about ads for a moment, instead of an ad that sounds like an ad, try doing a host-read ad that sounds like a natural part of the conversation. Now, my friend Allie over at the Allie Worthington Show does a fantastic job of this. So during her intro, and then she casually adds in her call to action or her quote-unquote ad, which is usually maybe about her coach school, her latest book, whatever it is. It's naturally part of the conversation, so it doesn't sound like it's an ad. And I absolutely love it. And I would love to see more people doing it that way, especially if you're going to be having ads, because a lot of times people are just skipping right over it. So let's take a look at the most common formats, which is basically your interview or co-hosted shows. Now, the reason they were the most popular is they're the easiest to do. They're the easiest to edit, and most hosts feel comfortable doing that, having someone to bounce ideas off of. You have that natural conversation happening. But here's the shocker, is that so many of the interviews that I listened to, which was probably over 50 different interviews, were all basically 30 to 45-minute audio infomercials. Yeah, there was maybe a nugget of wisdom here or there, but there really wasn't a lot of substance. It was like, this is why you should buy this book. This is why you should buy this program. You should be a part of this membership. Now, I'm not saying all of them. The more successful podcasts that I was listening to were awesome with hard-hitting interviews. And I really learned a lot from their experience, their guest knowledge, and their information was on point. The others? Well, it was just all fluff and one long sales pitch. Now, if you're new here, or maybe you just don't know, I am not a big fan of fluff. Because if I'm spending my time listening to a podcast for fun, whatever it is, whether it's true crime or motivation or mindset or whatever it is, it needs to be the real deal. Are you going to teach me something? Are you going to teach me how to be a better coach? Give me new techniques on storytelling or tips to manage my daily life of someone who has a chronic illness. And that's what most people want. They want something real. They don't want the fluff. They want the real deal. So if your podcast is not growing the way it should be, maybe take a look at the type of content you are delivering. Maybe there's some space to change. some things that you're doing. Now, one format that I believe has a lot of room for growth is solo podcasts and narratives. And honestly, that's because they're different. Not a lot of people are doing solo podcasts, and definitely not narrative or storytelling type podcasts, because these typically are the hardest to do, generally speaking. Solo podcasts are just you, your microphone, your knowledge, your personality, and your delivery. Now, the reason I do a solo podcast most of the time is because that's what I love to do. I'm sharing my knowledge and my expertise and the lessons that I've learned in podcasting with all of you. The other reason I love solo podcasts, especially as a listener, is because I don't feel like I'm being sold to. I'm learning new things. I'm listening to the expert that I'm the host. And for me, that's the priority. And I would venture to guess that a lot of your listeners are there for that same reason. Now, storytelling and narrative podcasts are experiencing exponential growth right now, as well as since the popularity of Serial, especially with it being in the news right now, and lots of other great storytelling narrative podcasts. Now, granted, these are slightly more difficult to produce, and you're definitely going to need an editor or learn how to edit yourself. Here's the thing about storytelling. Storytelling is an art. And if you are thinking of starting this type of podcast or maybe changing your format to do that, you need to make sure that you do your research and you need to prepare for it. And it's a much longer workflow time than a interview or co-host type podcast. Now, like I said, storytelling is an art. And we usually associate art with passion and creativity. But I think that storytelling in a compelling manner involves reasoning and logic as well. Now, you might be sitting there saying, Tammy, I'm not doing a narrative or storytelling podcast. Why should I care about storytelling? Why should it be important to me? Okay, so bear with me. When you aim to reach your audience through the spoken word, podcasting, no matter your motive, no matter what your niche is, storytelling is a powerful tool that can help you make the impact that you desire. So just a few episodes ago, I shared a little bit about some storytelling techniques. So if you go back and listen to episode 49, in that episode, I talk about the 3-act storytelling technique. So definitely go back and listen to that if you're interested in learning more about it. You could always do a Google search on it as well. Now, the 3-act technique is the one that I use for my own podcasts, as well as when I am producing other people's podcasts. So if you're not incorporating storytelling into your podcast, I definitely want you to start thinking about that and seeing how you could implement that into your podcast. Now, another thing that you can do with your podcast to set it apart is you could also provide a quality listening experience by creating segments with your podcast. So I'm not saying you're not providing a quality audio, but if you're not including segments into it, you're really kind of missing out. So years ago, I was producing a comedy podcast where they recorded for about an hour and they had different segments within that hour of audio. Now, each of these segments had one goal: to be entertaining for the listener. That was it. That was the only goal they had. So then each segment that they had within the show had a different style of content that kept the listener engaged over time. Today, many podcasts are segmented with fun questions, information, reports, recommendations, and more. Now, segments are not required for your podcast because, Wild Wild West. But what they do is they really set you apart from the rest, especially if you get creative with it. If you have a Bible study podcast, maybe at the end of every episode, you pull out a scripture that is pertinent to that episode. And that's your segment at the end of every single episode. Or maybe it's a prayer that you're sharing with your audience. No matter what you choose to be different with your podcast, I don't want you to let the fear, the anxiety, the imposter syndrome, whatever, be a factor. Make the podcast that you want to make, even if it's different. And of course, what your audience wants to hear. Because y'all, you were born to do this. This is what God has called you to do. God knows you, everything about you. And He made each of us with our calling in mind. We were not mass produced out of a factory where every single person is exactly the same. We're all different. There is no one else like you. There's no one else like me. And God has a special purpose that you were specifically made for. Because after all, y'all, sometimes you just got to stir up the water. So no recommendations this week, but I would love to ask you for a favor. If you have not left a review for the Creative Cast on Apple, would you mind doing that? I would greatly appreciate it, as it helps others find out about the show. And I love, love, love reading them, and I'll be reading them on the next episode. Now, friend, I want to see you accomplish your dreams, your goals, and not to let the intimidating tech, the overwhelm, the imposter syndrome stop you from achieving your goals, whatever they may be, podcasting related or not. So let's walk through this journey together so you can spend less time worrying about all the things, all the details, all the questions, all the to-dos, and more time spreading your message, the message that God has called you to share, to help you stay consistent, and above all, share your story to inspire others. I will be back next week with a full episode. I hope that you have a great day, and I will talk to you next Monday. Bye, y'all.